getting into politics.
I hear you.
Because,
Let me go on.
yeah, okay, but anyway.
Because now I'm not,
Yeah.
I completely agree with your
Yeah.
thesis. You know, I think that the two parties have a stranglehold on American democracy, there's no question about it. But just talking about what democracy we do have, it could be that there would be more insurgent types elected on either side, right, if it weren't for the constant rigging of the election system. I'm going to give you one example, okay? There's a guy named Clint Curtis in Florida who ran against Republican Tom Feeney, a very powerful Florida Republican, very close to the Bush family, very close to the religious right. Curtis was a computer programmer and a Republican who ran against Feeney because Feeney actually approached him in 2002 or 3 and asked him if he could develop a computer program that would allow someone to alter vote counts from outside the system. And Curtis's affidavit is online. Of course, everybody ignored it, you know. But he decided he would run against Feeney on the issue of election fraud and election reform. He ran against Feeney in 2006, and he lost. But knowing, as he did, that Feeney was involved in election fraud, what he did was he organized a canvassing drive in his district and went door to door and asked people to submit affidavits as to how they voted. And he did this with 2 other defeated Florida Democrats, John Russell and Frank Gonzalez, who all 3 of them lost under Clint's supervision. The other 2 also conducted these drives, and they all 3 found that the official vote count was off by enough points to have given them the victory. Okay, now what this means is that if Feeney and Lincoln Diaz Balart, and I forget the other fascist who won, you know, if they hadn't fixed the election, these 3 oddball Democrats would have become Democrats. Now, this part of the story totally bears you out. They took their evidence to the House Administration Committee, okay? Now in Democratic hands, it's David Obey running this committee. They said, look, here are these affidavits. Here's the official count. Could we have an investigation, please? The committee unanimously voted not to look at their evidence. See? And they were 3 Democrats who resisted the party's insistence that they drop it, because there must have been 12 or 15 other Democrats in 2006 who also lost suspiciously, and the Democrats told them, Rahm Emanuel told them, give it up. It happened at Tammy Duckworth in Illinois, DuPage County. So, you know, I guess I'm just asking you to respond to this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's vote fraud, and it's election fraud, vote fraud, and it cuts across both parties. I mean, I talk a lot about the Daley stealing the election for, evidently stealing the election for Kennedy in 1960, a lot about how Bush stole, how the Republican Party stole the election for Bush in 2000 in Florida. You all know the story, I hope, of the felons list. I think that's a central part of the story. You know, if you're a felon in Florida, you're not allowed to vote. So Katherine Harris and her colleagues put out fresh lists of felons just before, a few months before the election. So if your name was Jimmy Washington and you showed up at your local poll in Florida, and there was another Jimmy Washington who'd gone to jail, they'd send you away. And there were at least, you know, 8 to 20,000 people turned away. Almost all of them were black. 90% of them would have voted for Gore. There wouldn't be any argument about what happened in Florida if those people had been allowed to vote. And it is true that when there is a close election, you'll see remarkable cooperation and very little argument between the 2 parties. And maybe 1960 is a better example. But 2000 is a good example, too, where Richard Nixon is convinced that he's had the election stolen from him. But cooler heads prevail, and they say, look, Dick, you want to run again? You want to stay in politics? Drop this. Drop this. So what if Daley stole it? We probably stole it somewhere else at another time. Gore, similarly, was very wimpy. I mean, the fact that Gore asked for recounts in 4 counties instead of the whole state, what does that tell you about Gore and his relationship to the Republican Party? Does he really want to win? At what cost is he willing to push it? Evidently not to the point of looking like a real competitive candidate. I mean, if he'd asked for a statewide recount instead of the 4 counties, I think the judicial opinion might have been a little bit different. But anyway, I'm completely in agreement that there's a lot of vote fraud, election fraud, and that the two parties cast a blind eye. On the other hand, you do have situations where people like our good friend, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, John Conyers, does investigate vote fraud, like Ohio in 2004, which Mark wrote about very well in Harper's magazine. And he's ignored, and he's a senior Democrat. He's not from nowhere either. So anyway, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that, and I do talk about it in the book.
So given this, why then are you feeling that Gore gave up?
I'm sorry,
Why did?
why do I think Gore gave up?
Yeah.
Well, I think the people around him said, and Kerry too, I think the people around him said, hey, it's politics, friend, you know, and there are two parties, and we change positions from time to time, and this time you drew the short straw. Too bad.
Well,
So-
wait.
And you know, the fact that you remember the famous scene, remember the famous scene in Fahrenheit 9/11, where everybody, the House members who want there to be want to protest who want to challenge the results in the Electoral College, they can't get a single senator to sign the agreement that will allow the whole Congress to reconsider the Electoral College vote. And Gore is sitting there up in the as president of the Senate. He's sitting up there, you know, just pretending it doesn't matter. I mean, these are guys who are used to the game. They're used to the system, and they concede when they think it's in their interest, or when they're pushed too hard. And Nixon in 1960 is maybe the best example of somebody conceding when they didn't need to concede.
How would it be the Democrats' interest to give up? Why is it like
Well-
monetarily or politically wise? Are they that afraid of the
Well,
Bush administration?
I think they're afraid of reprisal, yeah, but I think it's also that there's a habit of collusion between the two parties, of cooperation between the two parties. It's hard to break, and they're not that competitive. They're really not competitive. I mean, this is again or as competitive as you'd like to think they are, and this again is the hardest thing for people to grasp. The idea that the Republican Party in Connecticut, for example, in 2006, would deliberately lose because they'd rather have a Democrat win. Because for them, Lamont is trouble. Lamont is a new face. He's from outside the power structure. He's self-financed. Whether he's a Democrat or a Republican is less important than will he cooperate within the rules. This used to happen in Chicago all the time. A congressman like Abner Mikva, my old congressman from the North Shore, who's now advising Obama, he decided he didn't want to take orders from Mayor Daley anymore. So Daley said, okay, that's it. We're redistricting you. You now have a 90% black district. So Mikva, who was heavily reliant on white Jewish voters, had to move to the North Shore to run for Congress again. This is the way that, you know, he's unusual, but he was punished. You know, if you don't play the game, you get punished. You get a primary, you get redistricted. They make your life miserable. And it's not a game for the faint of heart. And Mikva then finally wins as an independent Democrat. This is in 76. And you know, he serves a couple of terms, and then he would have been wiped out by the Reagan landslide in 1980. But he never gets back. Just because he wins his seat back or a seat back doesn't mean he's back in with the party regulars. Daley still hates him for his disloyalty. Bush still hates McCain for his disloyalty.